How is it that intellectuals, academics, the elites of our society are often the most morally confused, the most morally bankrupt? We saw that particularly when it came to Israel, October 7th, where you had college campuses and professors celebrating, justifying, or denying what happened. How do we have that? Well, intellectual Gad Saad explained in a PragerU interview recently how this phenomenon comes about. This is really insightful, and I think he's absolutely on the money here. Have a watch.
Almost every single time, bad ideas come from universities.
So Orwell answered it one way. It takes intellectuals to come up with some of the dumbest ideas.
Yes.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Now, why is that? The academic who literally lives in the ivory tower is fully decoupled from the autocorrective mechanism of reality, right? So for example, I am housed in a business school. In the business school, there is less parasitic ideas because if you build an economic model to predict the economy that's based on postmodernism, reality will tell you you suck. Engineering schools also have less parasitic ideas because if you build a bridge using postmodernist indigenous physics, then the bridge will collapse. So some disciplines have an inoculation against these parasitic ideas, but in other disciplines, in the humanities and some of the social sciences, I could sit on top of my pulpit, pontificate about nonsense. There isn't an autocorrective mechanism called reality, and that's why I become the promulgator of nonsense.
That is absolutely right. If you don't have to face reality, then you're more likely to engage in stupid ideas, even if they sound brilliant. Dennis Prager loved saying that phrase of, I think it was Orwell who coined it, that only an intellectual or an academic could say something so stupid. And people think they're so brilliant by coming up with these new ways of seeing the world, these perverse, oppressed versus oppressor mentalities and narratives that they think are so brilliant, explain everything. And if only we could create my leftist utopia, then everything would be wonderful. But they don't have to face reality. And you find that's absolutely right. This is a principle of life. The more you have to confront reality, the more likely you are to have a mature, realistic view of the world. That is why the Israeli youth are far more mature, far more just willing to show resilience and be more selfless and fight for their country than you have people in the West. Because in Israel, they have to face the reality of the threat to the West, the Islamist threat, in a far more direct way. So they're confronted more with reality. Maturity happens by necessity. So you could mature very quickly at the age of 10, or you could be very immature at the age of 30. So how do you resolve this? Well, one of the components is many people are saying the only way that people in the West and academics are going to wake up is by being confronted with reality, which means things have to get worse before they get better. Okay, we don't really want to go down that path, do we? But maybe that is going to be part of it. But there's other elements to it too. The other element is, where do you get your sense of moral order from? Where do you get your values from? What do you use as your light? If it's not divine wisdom, if you leave God out of the picture, then certainly from a Jewish perspective, your philosophy of the world, of the why of reality, which is what the humanities deal with much more so than the more vocational subjects that Gad touched on. If you're more pontificating, if that's just the nature of your academic study, then you do need more of a guide for that. And that is why Dennis Prager, by the way, was very famous for quoting one of the first things we say in the morning: the beginning of the wisdom, this is in the Jewish prayer book, the beginning of wisdom is fear of God. And Dennis said, I concluded from this, in a place where there is no God, there will be no wisdom. And that is the state of college campuses today. So I say, why don't we introduce into college campuses the study of biblical narratives, which have shaped the Western world and are absolutely fascinating and have more richness and depth to them than the works of Shakespeare? I think it's high time that we think about that. Certainly, if we want to look at saving the West, because the Islamists are at least providing people with meaning. And vacuous secularism is not going to fill that void. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so we need to provide an equally compelling, meaningful, divine, transcendent sense of meaning for people in the West and across the world if we're going to have any hope of dealing with a opposing religious kind of evil. Imagine you're running for your life. Your home is no longer yours. Your neighbours spit at you in the streets. The government has branded you an enemy, stripped you of your rights, your livelihood, your humanity. You're a Jew in Nazi Germany, 1938, and the world knows your people are being crushed under Hitler's iron fist. You're desperate, clutching a suitcase with everything you own, praying for a visa, a ticket, a country, any country that will let you in. Now imagine this. The world's most powerful nations gather to decide your fate. 32 countries meeting in a lavish hotel by a serene lake with the power to save you, to save hundreds of thousands like you. And one by one, they say no. Welcome to JTV. I'm Ollie Annersfeld, and today we're diving into one of the most gut-wrenching, shameful chapters in modern history, the Evian Conference of 1938. This was the moment when the world had a chance to stand up, to open its doors, to save countless Jewish lives from Nazi persecution, and turned its back. This is a story of hope dangled and then snatched away, of sympathy that never became action, of a failure that paved the way for the Holocaust. We'll uncover every layer of what happened at Evian, why it unfolded the way it did, and the chilling warning it holds for us today. This is not just history, it's a mirror, forcing us to confront who we are when the world cries out for help. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.